And that happens all through the industry. That's not just at the dealer level. That happens at the OEM level too. You get so set into, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way, and so people are chasing a process that they've been told they have to follow versus doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And the right thing, 99% of the time, doing the right thing is satisfying the customer. I'm just going with the whole grayscale thing. It works.
It is a nice touch. Is everything always in black and white? Oh, there's red sails on the boat in the background there.
Ooh, he's good. Yes.
Check that out.
It is a good representation of your current climate and ours. 75 and sunny here in New Orleans.
Yeah. And it's just.
Yeah. 34, and it's actually sunny, but it's
has
cold.
It snowed recently out there, or is it just cold?
There's still some snow on the ground. They got a lot of snow at the end of November, beginning of December, and it's I say they. I'm sitting in the house. But a lot of it's melted. So we have a little bit of snow on the ground, but not as much as they've had over the last.
So you say they. I guess what we should do is we should start off by saying who you are, so we can get you worked into the they. Yeah. So this is Marc McAllister. The famous Marc McAllister. Marc is on our team. So this is kind of an introduction of McAllister, but we already know you. So I guess we'll start off why you use the pronouns they, them.
Thanks. Thanks for the ambiguity there. I appreciate that.
Actually, no, you've been in France for the last how long? Where do you call home now? I mean, I feel like most of your time's in Europe.
It goes back and forth. Yeah, recently I've been spending a bit more time in France, but home is really where the family is, and that's a moving target. So this week it's in Wisconsin. We have a house here in Wisconsin, and last week it was in Paris.
Nice.
So it goes back and
forth.
Hard
life.
But so a little bit about me. So like, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Yeah, you don't really have much of an accent, but I know that once you start drinking, you do.
Right.
And so, can you please
thanks for that.
Tell us?
I love that, Marc.
It's really fun.
So where am I from? I'm from Dublin, Ireland, originally, and I grew up there. Went to school there until I was 17. I moved to America, to Wisconsin, believe it or not, and ended up going to university here in Milwaukee. And so, as you do. After college, you work for local employers. So ended up with Briggs & Stratton for a short while, and then moved to Harley-Davidson a long time ago.
And you string, is that right?
Correct. Mechanical engineering. So came into Harley as part of the twin cam design team.
Nice.
And so before the twin cam, Evos were still in production, and our task was to beat the Evo, which I know there's a whole bunch of people out there are probably like, well, that wasn't hard. And then there's a very small number of people who are like, oh, no, that's still.
Which brings us to our first topic, twin cam camp chain tensioners.
Yeah, whose fault was that? Was that all your fault, Marc?
Not all my fault. Not all my fault, but it was one of my parts.
Whoever does shoot it.
Yeah.
No, so, there's a whole host of people involved in any design of a product. But yes, it was one of my parts in the original print.
For the record.
The original prints would have my name on them. Yes. In fact, I think, a long time ago, Harley-Davidson actually got a patent on that design. So
do you have are you listed on that patent as well? Wow.
Like along with a few other engineers who are involved in the design.
How many patents do you have to your name so far, Marc?
That's it.
Okay. Wow.
That's the one.
I figured with your other engineering work, you'd have some more in there too.
No, I mean, engineering, 99.9% of all engineering is applying technology to a problem. So most engineers, most of the time, aren't out creating new stuff and getting patentable product. They're applying science to fix problems and make things work better or slightly better or in a different way or whatever. So a lot of the engineering that we do with the engineering company I'm involved with is applications, fixing problems for people. And a lot of times it's because they need extra capacity or they just don't have those skill sets, whatever. So we're just brought in to help occasionally. So it's good. But yeah. So that's how it got me into motorcycling in the first place. I was a cyclist and a sailor. This is Dublin sailing, where as a young kid, I sailed in that harbor there with the nice red sails.
Good. And
hence the picture in my house. But and quickly figured out that a big part of motorcycling is the community. It's a funny thing, right? Because you anytime you look at a motorcyclist, it looks like a solo pursuit. You're the only one on the bike, and 90% of the time, yes, there's a passenger seat, but you're probably the only person on the bike. But it's so much of motorcycling is about the community. It's really not actually a solo pursuit.
Yeah.
And anytime you've been around any motorcyclists anywhere, they get more excited off the buzz of being around other motorcyclists than they do about necessarily what happened on the road or on the track or on the off-road that day.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for all power sports, really. I mean, it's
well, I think like
side by side, it's a little bit different. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say what we were talking about before this. I mean, I think you can apply that to damn near everything that people enjoy as hobbies.
I agree.
Golf, sailing,
and that's
boating.
Yeah, and in so many of those pastimes, or whatever you want to call them, whether it's golf, whether it's sailing, whether it's whatever,
Hunting.
they have some kind of a clubhouse. They have some kind of a meeting place.
Yeah.
That people get, that's where they come together and they get excited about whatever their pastime is, whether it's in the clubhouse telling stories about how you hit the one shot that made your day or the one that really ruined your round, whatever. Same in sailing. You're in the clubhouse talking about what went right, what went wrong. And I think in motorcycling, the dealership provides so much of that, because we don't necessarily have clubhouses.
Yeah, like the bench racing side of it is done in the dealership if it's done right. Done right.
And there's, for every MotoGP champion, there's 1,000 other motorcyclists who have just as good a story, but just don't go quite as fast. And that's what we love about this, and that's how we get our buzz and how we feed our passion for the sport. And so when you and I met a little bit later in my career, it was really around that, focusing on the customer and focusing on how do we make customer experiences better in the dealership and give the dealer more time or more focus to really engage with those customers around the passion, around the why are we excited about being a motorcyclist. That really resonated really, great with me, because that's what I think a dealership is. It's the clubhouse.
Well, so your time at Harley didn't end with you in mechanical engineering. You moved into dealer development, right?
Almost did, but no, didn't. Yeah, I didn't know whether it was wisdom or aspirations or whatever, but yes, I did move out of engineering. So no, yeah, I think because of my family situation and because of my interests, I didn't stay in engineering. I stayed in engineering for 7 years, and then a few more years in still in product development, but more working with our suppliers and helping suppliers deliver product on time and with the quality and cost that we were looking for.
And that kind of came with,
but that led me to
the experience. That came with the experience of being in the engineering side and realizing, okay, we got to source this information or source these materials. I'll work on the sourcing side.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that every move in my career was really a diagonal step, if you will, right? You like there's something lateral to it, but you're building on some experience from the existing role. So, gives you a little. And so, I moved to Europe and worked and lived in Europe for 8 years with Harley, but a couple of years working with suppliers, and then transitioned into the sales and distribution business in Europe, which was fantastic. That was awesome.
How many set up in Europe?
So there was an existing dealer network that Harley has gone back and forth in Europe a number of times, ebbs and flows. The time we were growing, but we added probably another 100 dealers over the 3 years or the 4 years from 2005 through 2008.
100 dealers in 4 years.
Yeah, we were expanding into Eastern Europe. We expanded into Russia. We expanded into Africa. So a lot of the growth was into those new markets. And it's the irony, right? I was in a dealership in a town in the Czech Republic, and there was a letter framed on the wall of this dealership from the early 30s. And it was from an original Davidson congratulating the dealers in the Czech Republic, and then Czechoslovakia, for Czechoslovakia being the largest overseas market for Harley-Davidson that year.
Oh, wow.
And I think it was like 33, right? 1933 or 1932 or something, right? And you're just thinking, like, okay, everything in this industry has happened before. You're just, repeating, you're recreating something. Cause here we are, like, opening a new network in the now Czech Republic. And, like,
It already been.
here wasn't, oh yeah, 75 years ago, this was old hat. So it was kind of fun. Yeah. But that's part of what I really loved doing, was working with dealers and growing the business.
So you've the dealership experience all across the world. Like, what does it look like? How is it set up? How does it run? What are some of the big differences that you recognize between what's happening in the US and what you've seen and are currently seeing as you're still in Europe right now across dealers? Is there a difference, really?
Well, so, I mean, superficially, yeah, there's a ton of differences because the scale in the US is just different, right? And you, even for countries that you would anticipate the scale to be similar, like Australia, the scale is just different. The Harley dealer, or because I was part of the Harley network, I'll use that example, but I think it goes for most dealerships in the US. Just the footprint is bigger, and the scale. And of course, 340 million people who are relatively wealthy all the time over the past 30 years when I've been working in this industry means that you just have a lot more volume going through the dealerships and so forth. So that scale piece is probably the biggest and most important difference. But when you get down to
You say
it,
more volume
like,
in the
how
US,
does
just to clarify, more volume.
Correct. Yeah, sorry.
Ford specifically.
No, not for Harley specifically. I think even, I mean, your dealership not your dealership, your former dealership in Louisiana, that's a pretty big dealership for Triumph, for square foot wise.
Yeah, okay.
Right. I'm not talking about volume.
Okay.
I'm just saying,
Physically,
an equal store in, say, what's Louisiana? New Orleans is probably what, the 30th, 25th city in the United States. So if you took
we're less than 1 million people. We're pretty small.
Okay. So if you took a city in, say, Germany that had less than 1 million people, the Triumph dealership will be smaller.
Really?
And it just footprints less. It's not to say they wouldn't do equal volume. In fact, at the moment, they might be doing more volume. It's just that, the footprint is different. And that changes the whole experience in the dealership, because you have more selection, you have more pressure on you to move, accessories and so forth, because you're filling out all that square footage. And that puts a different mentality on dealerships here. But the interaction for the customer, I think there is a small difference, but really not a huge difference in the fact that, riders are riders everywhere around the world, and they're all there for this. And when I say riders, I'm not talking about, people who have a scooter to go to work on. That's, more of a
commuter,
utilitarian purchase. It could be. Yeah. I'm talking about people who actually call themselves motorcyclists, right? Whatever that is. You would see.
Are dealers overseas, are they typically more soulless, like single line dealerships, or multi-line, same thing, just smaller scale?
Yeah, and that has more to do with the brands in the location that you're in. That has to do with the individual dealers. I mean, dealers everywhere are entrepreneurial, and they're focused on driving their local business. And so, given the opportunity, would they take a second brand? That answer is the same pretty much everywhere. I think most people, most of the time, the answer would be yes, because it might take some risk out of my business, or it might be an opportunity for me to grow my business, et cetera. But it's no, I don't see a significant difference there. Obviously, when I was with Harley, we had guidelines around what that meant. And so we had solo stores. We had what we call the umbrella rule, which was, if it's raining out, you need an umbrella to visit any other part of the store if there was more than one brand there. Yeah. So you had to leave the Harley area. So anyway.
Days working with dealers, trying to help dealers improve. What were your biggest hurdles? I'm sure you had dealers that you loved and they did, but I'm sure they weren't all that way. I mean, I know that Harley has had their performance groups, and they put a lot of effort into improving dealership operations. What would you say is the hardest part of that? Because say it's not really an elephant in the room, but there's always a dichotomy between manufacturer and dealer, and they probably don't have the best things to say about each other all the time. So coming from the manufacturer point of view.
Yeah. People, I think, is, if I look back at the goods and the goods and the not so goods.
Personally.
It's generally people, quality of staff, quality of of understanding. I was about to say education. That actually doesn't matter. It's really how people
Training?
figure out the work.
By education, you mean
Is
like
it, well, yeah, to a certain extent, education. I think that's the way we automatically try and fix the problem.
through training,
Of-
training do the
yeah.
job right, basically.
Yeah. And sometimes you're it's a tough business to attract high quality talent to globally. And particularly, you may have the one entrepreneur who's started the business and they really get it and they're turned on, switched on, and they're great. And they may have one or two or three other line reports that are equally switched on. But you can quickly see that, the quality drop off, that drives performance in a big way. I think if you get to a dealer where you've got a strong switched on manager, you're going to get a strong switched on performance. I think that generally plays through. Not all, I mean, that's a very big, broad stroke, but I do think people are probably because, systems don't solve people problems. Training doesn't solve people problems. I mean, they can bandage it occasionally, but it doesn't solve for it.
You're right. That's a great example is this store. There wasn't like a manager on site after we sold the dealership. There wasn't somebody here like giving a shit every day. Because of that, it slowly decayed into nothing. Not nothing, but it slowly decayed into a place that felt like it didn't give a shit. And so,
well, and unfortunately, I'm not going to name names or anything, but a few different times you have a high performing dealer, and as a brand, you're like, oh, great, we got a great one. Let's give this one more locations, because that's an easier way to grow quickly than it is to go find another great one. And what you end up doing is then, a lot of cases, dealers don't have any bench strength. They don't have any depth. And you've now just overloaded a top performer.
Yep.
And now both sides underperform because they just don't have the talent to do it. And it happens more often than not, actually. But then
COVID.
you do find people. Sorry?
A lot in COVID.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of stores who became incredibly cash rich and decided to expand. And it's not that they weren't smart. It's not that they weren't like really passionate and knew what they were doing. No. They didn't have the team to keep a culture going on its own. And that kind of third or fourth location they did.
And that's why I say, the biggest issue is people. It's people, you need those consistent behaviors, need those consistent focus. You need those consistent, metrics to be able to say, this is what good looks like. And, and you can have great DMS, you can have PG participation, you can have all that kind of stuff, do all the brand training. You're not going to fix underperforming or staff. You got to solve for them.
As operators, and it's a tough thing to figure out how to solve. As operators, Max and I both, I think we can say that, attracting good people, talented people, isn't so much the problem as it is the retention of them, because they get in, and if you've got somebody smart, great, it's like you're automatically thinking, all right, an auto dealer is going to swipe them. They're going to move on to bigger, better things. What happens is you end up, if you're not proactive on your current staff, you end up with just the bottom of the barrel people that have been here for 20 years
that stick around.
That exactly.
There's
no better place to go.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I know, Mark, I've told you this story, but Danny got hired here. When I hired Danny at this dealership originally, he told me from the very beginning, like, I'm only here for a short time because I want to learn, because I'm opening my other shop. And it was like the most, he was the most valuable team member that we had, not just because he was sharp and very handsome and has a good shoe choice, because
I like that.
But because he was also thinking about, how do you make a better version of what this is? Which, like, so how does a store?
But this is exactly why we've been working together, is because we're all trying to figure out what that better version. And, for me, it really starts with, if you can crack this code and make a better version and deliver day in, day out, great customer experiences. This is such a fun industry to do it in. because you know that the people are so passionate about the sport, pastime, whatever you want to call it, of motorcycling, they will come in droves if they're getting a great experience and be happy to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, how many times have you talked to someone who, I mean, in my experience, this came out a lot, was you meet a Harley owner and you say, okay, well, you know, you live so-and-so. How come you don't go to your local dealer and you ride 100 miles, 100 kilometers, whatever, to a different dealer? Well, no, that's not my dealer. That my dealer is over here because I like that guy, because we have a relationship, because that's the experience I want.
That's what happened here.
You know, how do you do that?
The BMW guys drive all the way from New Orleans to St. Louis to go get their BMWs worked on. And man, power to the team at St. Louis. Like we got to send this to them. We are very impressed and love what you're doing. And sorry, but we're trying to get these guys to come back. But you know what? It's really hard to convince people who have felt like they're not loved and respected and their dealership doesn't care about them, that we care about you now. Trust us. Now we care. We didn't care before. We care now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And just like that's such a great example, right? I mean, what is it? 700 miles they're willing to go.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to need an oil change half as or twice as frequently just because of the transit from you to the dealership, right?
Yeah. And they love it over there. Hey, so I want to go back again because I want to fill out how well-rounded, and this is going to sound like I'm bragging about you, so don't blush, but like how well-rounded your experiences are, right? So you did the the Ducati, correction. You did Harley. You did things. You did Harley in engineering, so you know what it's like to build them. You know what it's like to get the parts for them. You know what it's like to set entire dealer network. You know what it's like for the dealer network globally around the country. And then you were like, you know what? I don't do this anymore. Let me switch to another side of our exact same industry. And that's where, what was that? Share that with the audience.
Well, what was that? You know,
after Harley?
Yeah, it was Harley.
Yeah, it was Tucker after Harley. I mean, so my career at Harley was, went through some ups and downs in the last couple of years. And I just got to the point where, well, I should say my wife and I got to the point, she's in the room. So I have to say that. Yeah. We got to the point that, you know, maybe it's time to do something different.
How long? 20-something years? How long?
24 years, yeah. And I actually went to a career coach and, you know, worked with that lady to figure out what the next best things for this idiot to do would be. And she told me that it was a lot more entrepreneurial than she anticipated, and maybe I should look at something more entrepreneurial, which of course that didn't actually play out, but it did engage me in looking at some other things, right? So that's what, hence the engineering company. But yeah, then an ex-colleague from Harley who was also now doing other things reached out and suggested that I take a look at this Tucker gig. And I went to lead the Tucker team to rebuild a business. And obviously we rebuilt it. It was private equity owned business at the time. So the goal in all private equity situations is to build a business and get it ready for the next owner to be happy with their purchase. So we built it. COVID helped a lot, but we did some great work at Tucker, restructured quite a bit, and then ultimately sold it in at the end of 2024. No, 2023. Sold it to exactly. But that's how you and I met, because we were looking at, you know, the reason I thought it was really interesting was Tucker being a wholesale distributing business. We had our house brands, but we also distributed 300 other brands, right? And so we were filling a gap in dealers that brands would never fill. Just because, you know the way this goes, right? If you're in the know, you've got to have the XYZ part to make your motorcycle different and better and faster or different, whatever. And that's this whole industry that is kind of outside the OEMs, where people are investing in accessories, in service components, and all the rest. Luca, please.
Hey, Luca.
Yeah, my son, he's rooting in a shopping bag. So I'm like, that's probably a little more background noise than you want. So it was really super interesting to me to think about, how does a wholesale business like Tucker fit into the dealer's environment to deliver that in a way that, what's the future of that business? And that's where we started talking about how do we build kind of a platform to help this ecosystem? Because the interesting part of that distribution business is it's a critical piece of the ecosystem of power sports, but it's an aggregation of scale, right? That's why these wholesale distributors exist. It's this, none of these individual brands can reach scale without some other business to help them with the footprint, the reach, etc. But you have to aggregate so many of these brands to get that reach. It becomes really difficult to communicate to dealers how to get the most out of it, and also how to make their business healthy at the same time. Because, okay, as a wholesaler, I could push and stuff every one of them with stuff they don't need to sell. Or we can help them think through how do they get the right products to the right consumer at the right time without necessarily having to have $300,000 worth of inventory on hand all the time. Because we have 5 warehouses full of product we can make it. Now, did it work out perfectly at Tucker? No, it didn't in that regard. But it's still something that I think we need to help the network get, because, again, satisfying these consumers with the passion around being the best they can be, giving them the best experience that they can have, that has to bleed into how do we do that at the dealer as well? How do we make the dealer have the best, become the best version of themselves, as our colleague Mark likes to say? How do we make them become the best version of themselves? Because that'll blight through to the consumer. So, so that's why we're working together.
It's funny. That's how we initially started working together. I actually got brought on by our other partner. So there's, 4 founding partners that kind of came together. Marc Jacobs, who I'm sure we'll have on here at some point. He can speak in his Yoda-isms. So Marc Jacobs brought us in to have that conversation and to work through how we future-proof, or how Tucker helps dealers get to the next level. And what's funny is, Danny and I had been having these conversations already, right? As this stuff started happening, we started having these conversations of what do future dealerships look like? And we have our perspective on what that should be, being a dealer and being so close to this. It was pretty incredible to suddenly have the guy who was like, oh, you're the dealer development / distribution / clearly the logistics engineering guy that we needed for this whole thing. It done quite well.
I don't think you needed me. Yeah. That's where
if the objective here is to, especially we're saying dealer lab, if nothing else, but if the objective is to define what the future dealer looks like, a dealership on its own can't change the way that it operates.
Right.
A dealership requires the cooperation of the entire industry if we're going to really try stuff differently than we've done it before. And that was the first couple conversations that we were having when we hosted that meeting in New Orleans, where you came in, and then we brought in some other guys. Mike Cunningham, we have to have Mike on here as well, bring him in. But so we had a bunch of people come in to talk about what future would look like. What would a new dealership, and I think the best part was it was framed around the name of the company. It was framed around what does the ownership experience need to have, and how do you do that through what the dealership is doing right now?
Yeah, I think the question was, everybody in this room, do you think that customer experience is suffering in this industry? And it was a resounding yes.
Yeah.
And it was, why is that the case? Yeah. And we had 2 full days of great insights from every corner of the industry. It was really great.
Yeah. We got a good kind of concept of where you come from, your experience getting into this. Maybe we should talk now about what is it that you think 5 years from now is going to look like for dealers? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's shorter or longer, but what?
Yeah, I think, so so I can form a sentence. What I think, so I hate to put like 5 years, 10 years, whatever, because I just think it's kind of this long arc, and when things actually happen are hard to determine. But we do seem to be in this situation where we are applying technology across the consumer experience to try and resolve some of the sticking points. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's great. And as we do that, we can't lose sight of the fact that the reason people still participate in power sports is because they find it fun and they get passionate about it. And as we apply all of these smoothing of experiences, because now, I was thinking about Roland and the execution with Echo, right? And he has this, that was a previous podcast that you guys did, that Echo is a phenomenal tool to smooth the purchasing process out and give dealers the opportunity to have a purchase experience when they're not even open and capture that passion in the moment. Right? The story about the guy buying a bike on Friday night at 9:00 or whatever. Yeah. But how does that happen, right? How does that consumer, how does that new motorcyclist have that engagement? It's because they're out with their buddies and they're in that moment and they don't want to lose that moment. And now Echo solves for that, and he's able to go through the purchase experience right there and then. So that's fantastic, but it's still the same emotion. It's still the same passion. It's the so, okay, great. Now we've got to solve for that. But how do we keep that momentum up? How do we deliver the experiences that make that consumer as super excited as we were 30 years ago, in my case, 30 years ago, not in yours, about, being a motorcyclist? And is it different? Sure, it's different. But that in the energy and the excitement, and you asked about people around the world, not the first time I've said this, but that is the most engaging part of motorcycling, because you can be in, and I have been at a motorcycle rally in China, a motorcycle rally in Europe, a motorcycle rally in North America, a motorcycle rally in Brazil. The level of engagement, the level of excitement about being part of the culture of motorcycling is the same. Yeah. That's the piece that levels us all in the same place. And, as we apply these technology solutions, what are the new behaviors that we need to have at a dealer level, at a consumer level, that keeps that engagement going? Yeah. Does that make
Absolutely
sense?
This reminds me a lot of, I'm sure you remember this. We were trying to visualize this concept of the customer journey, right? So, obviously a lot of the work we've been doing is trying to explain to dealers around the country what this vision of a future could look like, so we could all start heading in that direction. And so when we were working on it, one of the first visuals we created was actually like a sine wave. And the idea of the sine wave was that this is about positive and negative experiences that customers are having through their ownership journey. And one of the very first ones is like the excitement and engagement and like how a customer feels when they're buying their first motorcycle or their second or third, but they're buying. Mm-hmm. Like the buying experience, you get like better and better. And then it gets to the like, cool, we agreed on a number. It's great. I'm going to have this motorcycle pretty soon. And then like this very fast slide from that moment through all of the like paperwork and F&I and all the stuff that comes along with it. And so you actually get your motorcycle. In a lot of stores, that's a multi-hour process. It's it totally releases all that excitement. And you're right, Echo, the idea of Echo is like, okay, cool. Let's shorten the stingy part. So we can keep more time that's exciting. And I think the idea is, okay, well, yes, we can make the buying experience have a larger percentage of time positive than the negative percentage of time. Like, does that make sense? Like, if it's like 50% happy, 50% sad, like now we're going like, 80-20, because the sad, the scary, unfortunate, not exciting part is shorter, right? But how do you do that? Ownership and service, and ultimately a customer having to visit the dealership to get their tire changed or their service done or their anything. Like the repair event cycle time takes too long. The time it takes to check them in, the time, like the engagement is more unfun time than fun time.
I think that it comes down, I mean, you're exactly right, Mark, that the engagement level and the experience of riding a motorcycle is probably the same as it was 30 years ago, 50 years ago, but is the transactional part of being with a dealership is still the same. Whereas for the customer, in every other aspect of their life, that experience has changed.
Yeah.
Yet we still have the same transactional experience as we do from 20 years ago, as far as the wait times and the negotiating, everything.
Yeah.
15 years ago, we were calling a restaurant for a reservation. and hoping that somebody picked up and they'd have to go see if they had an availability, whatever. Now you just open your phone and go to Open Table. And the person going to the restaurant is still going to have the same great experience. But what changed? The placing the reservation was streamlined.
Yeah.
So with companies like Echo, we are in full support of. I understand that some dealerships might be scared of that. It's just meeting the customer to where their experience matches pretty much every other experience in their life.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, we agree. And I think, that's the long arc of change that we're on. And, in my career, I'm a fan of this, trying to modernize the dealership experience. So I've pushed occasionally, probably too hard in some cases, because our industry does really, changes across a dealer network. Change is hard because you got to get a lot of minds and hearts around, into that change. So, but at the end of the day, giving the consumer the experience that they anticipate and expect is kind of table stakes. And then giving them a great experience that's above what they expect, that's where you start to win. And, if everyone else is giving you an online experience to engage, if everyone else is making it easy to find financing and blah, 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 you got to that just becomes table stakes. Now you just have to do that. And then to win over that, now you've got to deliver something beyond. So what are, in our future state, who is the team and what are the behaviors of that team that deliver a more engaging experience for the consumer?
Yeah.
And forget the tools, because the tools become, but at the end of the day, the tools are fairly easy. As you've shown, Max, with, creating stuff on Replit, it's actually a pretty short leap once you have the idea. It's having the idea and then executing that's hard.
Yeah. It's like, we build a tool.
Behavioral changes are super hard.
Yep.
And once you're, and so many, particularly because our industry tends to be boom and bust, everybody's had a good year. Everybody's had 2 or 3 good years in most cases. So they've reinforced some behaviors that say, okay, this is what makes me good at what I do. And it used to make you good at what you do. But as consumers transition, you need to transition also. And so now it's, that made you good then. Now it makes you kind of stale. Because today the new experience is here or there or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I completely
100%.
agree. Yeah, I think one thing that we've realized, especially being back in the lab, but it was something that Danny and I have talked about a lot, and this has just proven it. It's hard to do the job. It's too hard to do, and that almost sounds like it's an excuse, but it is hard.
It sounds exactly what it is.
I mean, look, I understand that it is an excuse, but I've got a whole room full of people this morning, full of people running a service department, and the steps required to answer simple questions like, hey, where are the parts with this thing? Like just the amount of engagements in different programs we got to check and different things we got to pull together. That part is hard. And I'm not saying it's too hard to ever figure out. It's not, when I have an employee who's been here for 5 years, of course they can do it very quickly and easily. But what normally happens is you have that employee around here for 5 years. That person started working here at my $15 an hour because that's what I could afford. They started working here because they loved motorcycles. And then the job beat the crap out of them for so long. They're still here. They're less excited about motorcycles now, but at least they're efficient at working the 5 different systems I have. And so again, it's like so much of being on the team is just about checking the right boxes and doing the system the way that Lightspeed requires you to do it, or the other systems require you to do it. So it just burns people out because it's actually not.
There's no juice left in the tank. There's no enthusiasm left to give to the customer.
Yeah.
And that happens all through the industry. That's not just at the dealer level. That happens at the OEM level too. You get so set into, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way, and so people are chasing a process that they've been told they have to follow versus doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And the right thing, 99% of the time, doing the right thing is satisfying the customer.
Yeah.
Because that's where we come from. That's what makes your business successful, is satisfying the customer, not following a process that's been prescribed.
That is so true.
So one of the things that we've had to start doing, which should be done everywhere, is Max does a repair order audit every week for service writers to make sure that they're doing everything the way that they should do. And so there comes this tipping point with customer experience to doing it the right way procedurally. Like, we may have given this customer an excellent experience and he's gone, he's out, yet we get to the RO and there's no VIN on it. There's no mileage out. There's no license plate. There's no notes. The jobs that they prepared were for the wrong amounts, so it's like, customer got the great experience. That's most important. It's a disaster and there's no way to manage off of that.
Yeah. You know what's actually interesting?
Well, but how do you build a process that solves for the process?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it don't solve for the customer. The customer still needs that great experience. How do you make the process go away so that it just happens in the background? You need so let's just, pie in the sky solution. Like, why don't you have a license plate reader in service so that it automatically recognizes the license plate? And if it's in your system, now you already have the VIN, the model, the owner, everything gets filled out automatically. How do you make those? And that's a bad example, or just a simple, it's just an example of the one you brought up. But how do you solve for the process? No, don't solve for the customer, because the customer still needs that human, great experience. Make all the paperwork go.
Yes.
Yeah. That's because you're basically using, we're using service advisors as the example. I mean, this is like the role we really want to fix the most. You're right. They are both the office admin of every single thing that goes on in the repair order, and they're the face to the customer. And you think about that with the sales department. Your salesperson isn't doing all the title paperwork and all the other stuff. Their entire job is just to make friends.
Make the customer awesome.
So we built that entire side of the business, and we justified paying somebody to do that job. And then once you convince the customer to become the customer, to like buy it and be a part of our dealer group, you go, now you deal with the admin to get all the other stuff.
We're sending you to the gulag.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that exists everywhere in both in the dealership experience, but also in the supply chain of getting that product to the dealership, whether it's a distributor or whether it's an OEM. That exists everywhere, right? That if you had a district manager in there, if we were talking to a district manager right now, they're like, well, what does your job consist of? Well, these stupid visit forms, I got to fill them out, and they're 5 pages long, and it takes more time than I actually have to spend in my dealerships talking to my dealers. That exists everywhere. So the whole industry is full of these processes that slow us down and make it makes it more difficult to keep our customers happy.
Yeah. Actually, this is going to keep us talking in the same circles that started this whole thing, because we talked about this. Like, if I had one brand, if I just carry Polaris, for instance, that's my one manufacturer, I'm dealing with one OEM. That's like this suddenly becomes a lot easier. But very few are the sole single brand stores. So now you're dealing with every manufacturer has their own idea of how it needs to work and how information needs to be transferred and all of that. And how do you stock units? And so this is where we got to the point in our conversation in New Orleans 4 years ago. We were like, we need to, like, as an industry, work together. If we're going to make this any better.
Remember that we had the whole conversation about, if everyone was working off the same data, this would be so much easier, right? If we could provide a platform that had all the data in it, that everyone worked off the same version of truth, would the world be a whole lot easier? Because then we could focus on doing the good work.
Do that.
Let's just boil the ocean.
Sure. That's not going to be hard at all.
It's a good idea, Mark.
It's fun.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a few manufacturers who might have an opinion on this.
Yeah. I'm sure. We're in front of a couple OEMs and they've been like, they don't like that picture. Turns out they don't like this idea of making it easier for people to sell other motorcycles as well.
Yeah, but there are a few things we could do like that in our industry that we are slow to get to. Like in the auto guys world, right? The aces and pies stuff that they do around understanding inventory and part numbers and all of that kind of stuff.
Did you say aces and
there
pies?
Are ways to, you've got me. It's a standardized way of talking about your components.
Aces.
And so, yeah, well, I may be saying it wrong. So maybe we should cut this whole part out. There are things in the automotive world that make it easier for part numbers to correlate. So the way we always have to have 85 versions of a fit matrix so that everyone's part numbers fit.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell if things overlap. It streamlines for all of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Because you don't have all that same overhead in the auto world. Because they've just got so much scale they've figured.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have that figured out in our industry. And
Mhm.
well, there's a lot of factions that would disagree with you because because if everybody could figure out how easy it was to replace my part with somebody else's part, that's not a good idea.
Yep.
Everyone has to be on board.
Yeah.
And
all this conflict comes down to the bottleneck of dealers to figure out to deliver a good experience to the customer. So it's like dealers end up being the bad guy in this whole thing because
you're always on the
Of course
dealer
someone's on
side.
the
I
other
think it's, dealers play the bad guy occasionally, and sometimes the OEM plays the bad guy, and sometimes, we all have our roles to play.
that is true.
But it does sum up to sub-optimizing the consumer experience. And that is, I think, why it's exciting to think about working on a solution to make the consumer experience better, because that makes us all better.
I have a question. We got a kind of wrap it up question, which I think will be a good one. What is your relationship to wieners? I mean, specifically the Oscar Meyer wieners.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, because I could have gone very wrong.
Got me on that.
So the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile was designed by a guy named Brooks Stevens. And Brooks Stevens was a person who's from here in the Wisconsin area, in the Milwaukee area. And he started a creative agency. It technically a design agency, a product design agency, but Brooks had this fantastic view of the fact that product design, marketing, everything went together into delivering products that solved people's needs in a cool way. That people weren't making 100% utilitarian choices. They wanted to solve problems, but with a cool product that solved the problem.
Nice.
So the product design needed to be more than just a utilitarian solution. It needed to be a design that people wanted to interact. And long story short, Brooks Stevens designed the Wienermobile as a solution to solve for marketing a relatively mundane product. And obviously it became the Wienermobile itself became an iconic thing because, who doesn't know there's toys made of the Wienermobile.
I have a Christmas tree. I haven't sent you the picture this year. I send you a picture every year. This year.
So, and Brooks Stevens, that agency is the engineering and product design agency that I'm a part of.
So you basically could say that you own the patent to the Wienermobile.
Well, the design on that product is long worn out now, and and as with any agency, your customer ends up owning the design. So Oscar Mayer owns the brand, but yes, I do own the business that created the Oscar Wiener.
That's pretty awesome. All right,
Oscar Mayer Wiener. Along with a whole host of other products. A lot of Harley design came out of Brooks Stevens. Willie G. Davidson himself worked with Brooks at Brooks's agency before he went to work at Harley. So there's a long history of engagement with the product.
What was that cool? What is the car?
That car, I don't know if it was really cool, but the one it wasn't a kit car.
No, it had the fake exhaust out the side.
Yeah. Oh, the Excaliburs. Excalibur. Yeah. So Brooks designed the first generation. He loved 1930s automobiles, particularly 1930s Mercedes automobiles, and thought that they were gorgeous, and Bugattis. He had a couple of Bugattis as well. And he designed this car it's not a kit car. It was a production vehicle, but it was built on there was a lot of componentry used from primarily GM. And that business was run by his sons here in Milwaukee as a kind of a spin-off of Brooks Stevens agency. Yeah.
So you don't own any of those?
No, I have looked at a couple though, because particularly the Gen 1 is such it's actually a cool 2-seater roadster. It's a pretty neat vehicle, but no, we're working on a couple of different projects around that. I think we're working on a Studebaker because Brooks did a bunch of work for Studebaker back in the day, and there's a couple of designs that weren't actually ever launched, and we're working on one of those at the moment. So there's things going on.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, that is where I'm headed as we wrap up here. To head down there.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, I'll send you pictures of Wienermobile ornaments, and you send me pictures of cool cars.
I'll send you a picture of a Studebaker.
That's great. That sounds great. All right. Hey, Mark. Awesome chatting with you again. Thank you so much for sticking around, for talking with us. We'll see you in another meeting in like a couple hours.
Yeah, exactly. See you guys.
Thanks.